everybody's healthy, well and healthy at the end, so thank you. Thank you very much. As we all know, time is allotted at the end of each meeting for the commissioners to receive comments from the public. We have 4 consent items. We have a regular session minutes dated December 12th, 2023. We have liquor minutes dated December 12th, 2023. We have closed session minutes dated December 12th, 2023. And we have Environmental Operations Division, Public Landings. We have Bayside Landing Marina Renovation Waterway Improvement Grant Agreement Extension, which basically, for number 4, means that we're postponing that improvement. We have an extension so we can postpone that for a year. I entertain a motion.
So approved.
Got a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, the ayes have it. County Attorney Tom Yeager with a legislative session protocol.
Thank you, Mr. President. You do have an item tonight for third reader for your legislative session. So in a moment, you'll be entertaining a motion to go into legislative session. This is CHR 5/2023, which is a zoning text amendment. You've already had your public hearing on this, and you did keep the record open after the public hearing, and there were some written comments received. I believe those are in your packet. There were 2 written comments, and just so the record reflects that these 2 written comments will be considered part of the official record because they were submitted after the public hearing ended, but while the record was open. So when you do go into legislative session, you would be voting on this piece of legislation, and you essentially have 3 options. You can pass it as it's currently written. You can make an amendment to it, pass it as amended, based on information that you've had from the public hearing. And if you do pass it as amended, somebody, I think Mr. Mackey can assist, that should be in writing. So if we're going to amend it, we can mark it up and type it up later, or we can do whatever, but we would need to have something in writing so you're in conformity with your code. Or you can reject it, or defer it to a later date. Essentially, that's what you have. And CHR 5/2023 deals with the outdoor retreat text amendment to the code, which was explained detailed by Mr. Mackey at the public hearing. And Mr. Mackey is available this evening if you wish to hear further from him when you enter into the legislative session. So this time, Mr. President, you would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we go into legislative session.
That's a motion. Do I have a second? Motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.
And I just wanted to also mention, you have a second item for first read. So CHR 6/2023, you are not going to be voting on that tonight. You're going to introduce it, and if you want to go forward with it, you would direct staff to have it scheduled for a public hearing. So first, we would take up 5/2023, outdoor retreats.
Mr. Mackey, you want to come up?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good evening. This item is an act to amend your zoning code to add a new land use as a special exception. It could be termed outdoor retreat in the rural residential, community residential, and rural character districts. On July 6th and August 3rd, your Planning Commission held a public hearing and made recommendation, and a letter is attached. And on September 6th, the Agricultural Advisory Commission made recommendation, their letter is attached. This has been introduced by you all. You've held your public hearing. As Attorney mentioned, there was public input both at this table during that public hearing and also afterwards. And the item is presented for your consideration, as County Attorney discussed, to adopt with written amendments or possible rejection, or again, you could entertain it another time.
And I see, based on Commissioner comments at the last meeting, Mr. Mackey has prepared an amended version,
Yes,
which
sir.
is for your consideration. That doesn't mean you have to adopt this, and you are free to have additional amendments beyond this if you so choose. We just need to write those down.
The only amendment that you've made so far that we've made so far was about the number of family guests.
There was some discussion, you had mentioned wanting
I did.
to reconsider that,
That was the
so,
one thing jumped out at me, that you were allowed to
Right.
take husband and wife and 2 kids. I
Right.
thought, well, suppose you got 3, you gotta leave one home. No,
Right.
of course not.
so.
But that was, I see you've made that change.
Well, that, you all would need to formally move to amend that.
Right.
I've just put together language as a suggestion for you all.
Right, so your motion would be, if this is what you want to do, you would say you want to adopt this as amended, whereas in section G, the sentence, "There shall be a maximum occupancy of 2 adult guests and 2 additional children guests in each guest unit," that would be stricken, and that would not be part of the adopted bill. And, Mr. Mackey, am I correct that the fire marshal would apply to this, right? There would be, whatever limits the fire marshal may impose for a building of this size would be applicable, as they would be for anything in the county, correct?
Yes. Right, no structures currently exist, so there would be building permits and new buildings and reviewed for all the standard things. Yep.
So even with this taken out, there still is some control as far as having an overloaded unit?
There certainly would be an occupancy limit, yes, sir.
And as far as fire suppression goes, we would still require sprinklers.
That's my understanding, yes, sir. Because I believe this would be considered commercial.
Is there an occupancy limit on houses?
Like, as in a formal occupancy limit by the fire marshal? I'm not sure. I mean, I think functionally there probably would be, but I don't have that information available right now.
It's usually typically a commercial.
Right,
Right, not residential.
yeah.
And this would be, maybe I spoke too soon. I'm kind of assuming this is a commercial use because it's a short-term lodging
Right.
facility, similar to a hotel or a
Yes.
B&B or
I believe
campgrounds.
our building official would review it as a commercial use, and those rules would apply.
Is the county prepared to do any sort of code enforcement with these dwellings?
We're always prepared to respond to complaints, and that's usually how we operate. Most jurisdictions do.
What would be the penalty or the fine? I mean, do we have,
So for our zoning code, penalties are up to $100 a day, and each day is considered a separate occurrence. So, but those are essentially enforced through the court system. But usually you end up going to court for those things. Some people pay.
Now, there would have to be, I mean, and if this goes forward, there's building permits all along the way, just same as if you were building anything else.
Yes, sir.
do we have any sort of an idea of what how the septic would be on these?
That would have to be reviewed by a health department and again, because, I mean, currently, at least the discussions we've had, this is a relatively new use, and I would imagine that would be all new buildings. I mean, maybe there's somewhere,
If they're not,
something like this.
hooked up to public sewer, then they gotta get a perk test.
Right.
And our
Sure.
decision, if we were to pass it or not, they
Right.
still gotta get that perk test.
Yes, sir.
I would
Yeah.
assume.
Yep. Yeah, uses in the zoning code are what we allow. There's still many, many things that have to be met in order to actually have it happen. So, yeah.
I have a lot of concerns about this as a text amendment. I'm not, I support this lady and her idea and this one where it's at. But, with 10 to 15 cottages, there is going to be a certain amount of traffic. There's going to be a certain amount of noise. We don't have a noise ordinance in Kent County. We all know that because we've been asked about that. And I think that I wish that we could address some of those issues personally before we move forward with this as a blanket for the county. I think that the code enforcement, I mean, the last couple of weeks, I've been talking to several people about this, or they've talked to me about it, and I could see this, these things, everything, it's a great idea, but sometimes these ideas evolve into things that maybe don't fit the parameters of a getaway, I mean, or a weekend, or camping, or, I have reservations about what happens next when I'm just going to use this example because she's the one that's coming to us. She has this place and it's a glamping thing now, and the next people that buy it don't want to have to deal with the glamping, and they just say, oh, you know what, we'll just rent the things out. Well, I mean, I know that we say that they're code enforcement, but I think that we need to have some meat or some bite in that code enforcement, because I can see these things, particularly in today's times. I could see these things being abused and us not having the wherewithal to go after the particular owners of these things. That's just things that I have concerns about.
Any other questions?
Is there anything currently that would forbid them from turning this into a place where people could stay for a year?
Well, there's specific conditions that.
In other words, if they were to rent them out as part-time residences or whatever.
As envisioned, there's a limit to the length of stay.
2 weeks.
And that would be enforceable, and when, for a special exception, the Board of Appeals has to review it. They issue a decision in order, that's a binding decision, and any use that strays from that would immediately be subject to, the $100 a day fine once we issue. Generally, our process is we reach out verbally by phone or a visit and ask people, alert people to the fact that something is amiss and ask them to address it. That's followed by a letter, and if that 2 steps don't work, then that's followed by a letter and a citation, then a fine starts running every day.
So because this is a special exception,
All those are requirements.
even if the property were to sell, it still would be required to be abided by.
Yes, the special exception essentially runs with the
It
land,
runs with the land. So if,
not the owner.
right, so if the current owner gets the special exception and it's continuously in use, it doesn't lapse for a year, and they sell it and it's operating, the new owner does not have to go back before the Board of Appeals. The new owner can continue to operate it just like the prior owner did. If for some reason the business lapsed, they shut it down for a year, I think it's a year and a day, and it doesn't matter if it's still owned by the existing owner or if it's been sold to a new owner, then they would have to start over again and go back to the Board of Appeals and get a new special exception.
And I think your Board of Appeals does a good job of being very specific about the conditions. There's a lot of detail, and when those details aren't followed, then the property's no longer in compliance.
Yeah, and things tend to be complaint-driven. So, for example, if this was intended to be short-term rentals, and it turns out the rentals become seasonal or annually, chances are Mr. Mackey's department's not going to know about it unless somebody complains. And then if somebody complains, then we would start the enforcement. But just from a practical nature, for the enforcement to be effective, it's usually more effective when you catch the action when it starts. For example, if this is for short-term rentals and it turns out that it's being rented seasonally or yearly, and this goes on for several years, and then there's an enforcement action, then it becomes problematic because you have this business operating beyond what it was intended to do. So you can't predict the future. I don't know where it's going to go, but if there's a violation and it's caught early it can be abated. If it goes on for years and then you decide you want to enforce, then it's going to be problematic for you.
This is a well-connected community. I think people know each other, people aware of things. I have been asked how many code enforcement officers do we have, and I've responded about 19,000, so we get calls. Little goes unnoticed.
That's a good one, Bill.
And this was reviewed by the Planning Commission,
Yes, sir. And also the Agriculture Advisory Commission as well.
and the Planning Commission give a recommended approval,
Yes, sir.
or give it a
They call it favorable.
favorable recommendation.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else got any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to amend proposed Code Home Rule Bill 5-2023 to delete the second sentence of the proposed subsection G on page 4 in order to remove the currently proposed requirement to limit the number of children staying with their parents and/or guardians in a guest room.
I got a motion, do I have a second? I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Hey,
The ayes have it. Okay.
And then I believe you would now move to adopt the bill as amended. I believe there's a second motion
Amended
required.
it.
I amended
You
it.
amended it, now just vote to adopt it as per
amended.
Commissioner Price's amendment.
We don't do this often, so thank you.
I'll move to amend the bill as,
Pass the bill as amended.
pass the bill as amended.
There you go.
And I'll second it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it.
Now you're good. And then the next thing is the introduction of the next bill.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you.
You gonna
If
move
you-
on to the next one?
Yes, sir, with your permission.
Yes, absolutely.
So the next item is, I believe, going to be proposed Bill 6-2023 if introduced. It is an act to also add a new land use, which is titled The Adaptive Reuse of Existing Structures in AZD located on parcels under 20 acres. So this would add a new land use. It would only be in one district, and it would also add this to the list of special exceptions that may be approved by the planning director, and it would also add specific conditions to the addition of that use. So, and this did go before the Agriculture Advisory Commission on September 6th, and your Planning Commission held a public hearing and made recommendations on November 2nd. Both of those letters are attached. This language is already proposed in the land use ordinance for your consideration coming up this year. There was an applicant who is, I believe it's common knowledge, the purchaser of the former home of the animal shelter, and this language in the proposed land use ordinance was specifically designed for those properties in AZD that are under 20 acres, have some kind of existing structure on them, and there really isn't a use in AZD that makes sense for them. When a property is under 20 acres, it can't be a farm, so you can't use the primary use. And AZD is generally really designed for agriculture and support of agriculture. So there's a few things like former church buildings, the animal shelter. There's a few scattered buildings that really, because of the size of the property and the limited uses in AZD, there's not a lot of things that can be done with them if their current use sort of ends. So this allows reasonable uses to be proposed and considered for the reuse of, again, a building on a property under 20 acres only in AZD. So the goal for tonight is, if you are so inclined that you would choose to introduce the bill and schedule a public hearing, then that would sort of initiate the process for consideration. And I believe the applicant is online if you have questions. That was the plan.
Well, I would certainly think that this is just me speaking, but I would think something like this, we would certainly want to have a public hearing, give both sides an opportunity to express their opinion and see where it goes. Yeah.
Okay.
That would be my thoughts, but
So I haven't heard that. I'd like to make a motion to introduce Code Home Rule Bill 6-2023 and for the bill to be scheduled for a public hearing at a future date in the Commission's hearing room at 400 High Street.
Got a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Now, for a little clarification, because I was here the day that people from the animal shelter were here talking to the planning commission about it. Are they being held up does this free them, if this was to pass? Is that an example of what, I think you used that as an example, actually?
Yes, sir.
That, now, what would change with that? Are they limited now to what they can do with that piece?
Yes, because there are not a lot of general commercial uses in AZD. I mean, it's designed to support agriculture, so
I mean, if somebody wanted to make a mechanic shop out of it right now, that's not allowed.
I don't believe so, no.
How about that?
Yeah, so, and again, it really does put parcels that are under 20 acres in kind of a bind, because they can't be a farm. And that's the primary use, so then they have to be something else, and the number of uses are pretty limited. So again, this just allows for, a handful of properties scattered across the county that are sort of stuck in this place, to be able to come and ask for some kind of relief.
I got you.
And these are existing created lots, so we're not creating lots by this, we're just
Right.
taking existing properties.
Yep. With structures on them, so. Right. So, all
Very
righty.
good. Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration of these bills and your votes. I know that you're all, you take a lot of thought and consideration, so thank you.
Well, you want to introduce it and direct the staff to schedule a public hearing.
We did that,
Already
didn't
did that.
You did that?
we? Yeah, we did that.
I made the motion and directed
Howard
staff. to-
seconded.
Oh, okay, then we're good.
All right.
We've been here a long time today.
Yeah, you got started earlier, right?
So now we need a motion to go back into open session, excuse me.
I'll make a motion that we go back into open session.
Second.
Close
Got a
the,
motion and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, the ayes have it, we are in open session. Jeremy Rothwell and Jennifer Moore, here to speak about the granary.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We submitted the report from the consultant that we last discussed about 2 months ago, that went out and did they did essentially a quick survey at the granary, and they took, as expected, it took 4 to 6 weeks for them to get back with us, and that was from SGH. We got it back about 2 weeks ago or so, and it outlines what needs, the big picture items in terms of what needs to be done to the granary. And I don't know if there's a lot of surprises. I think a lot of the issues identified, I think that the county Public Works Department and Parks Department, already knew some of these issues that were for the granary and everything. So, in terms of, they laid out a series of steps in terms of, what can be done next. To actually move forward to do anything to the granary would, as a non-residential structure, would require signed and sealed plans. I went out and contacted Barton Ross, who is a preservation architect. He used to serve on our board. He does a lot of work nationally, and he submitted a proposal, which I also provided to Shelley, in terms of how much it would cost, and he estimated, he gave a contract price for $25,000. If you wanted to go out and do a bid, that's fine. I wanted to give you an idea in terms of how much something like that would cost to be able to come up with architectural plans, to figure out exactly what needs to be done and what would be submitted for a building permit, as required by your code. That's the first piece, and then, in order to, as requested, we updated it today, the secured and pending grant opportunities. So the Kent County Historical Society has, at their Board of Directors meeting, agreed to allocate $2,500 towards the preservation plan. And then I lay out a series of grant opportunities that would potentially cover the capital construction. And Jen and I met or spoke with Heather Barrett from the Maryland Historical Trust, with Gail Owings from Stories from the Chesapeake. I reached out to the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and I outlined when the potential grant deadlines and what the criteria and the conditions for any grant funding you would have to meet. Now, for the capital grant funding, the good news is that if you have a nonprofit which submits on your behalf, whether that be the Farm Museum or another 501c3, it does not require a one-for-one match for the capital grant funding through the Maryland Historical Trust and from the Heritage Area Authority. Each of them award grants up to $100,000. And if you have a 501c3 nonprofit apply on your behalf, it does not require that 50-50 match. If you, as the local government, apply, it does require a 50-50 match for the state grant funding. The National Trust for Historic Preservation has a grant program just for the Eastern Shore of Maryland. You have two options. If you wanted to apply for what's called an out-of-round grant funding to cover the cost of the preservation plan, you can do that. You're not guaranteed funding. I spoke to the grants manager. If you get grant funding for the preservation plan, you're likely not going to get grant funding from them for the capital plan. The capital program, the Bartis True grant program, awards grants up to $25,000, and that deadline is in June. The MHT and the Maryland Heritage Area Authorities, you got about a 3-month window in terms of, and in the case of the Heritage Area Authority, you have about a 1-month window in order to submit what's called a letter of intent if you intend to apply. You could, National Trust, I believe, would give, and I offered to provide and do the grant application, but Shelley did say that, you would have to approve anything before I can apply on your behalf. So that option is available if you apply or have myself apply immediately. Stories of the Chesapeake Heritage Area, they have a small grant deadline of January the 22nd that you can get $5,000 to help cover the cost of the preservation plan if you so choose. So in terms of, we're trying to provide opportunities for you to, in terms of being able to meet your intent at a most cost-effective means for the taxpayers of the county.
Well, I appreciate all the hard work you've done, believe me, I do, but I don't know that there's a lot of appetite to spend a lot of money in this building, because we tried it once, and then, I think, and this is just me speaking, I really appreciate that, the piece of history that's sitting there. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying, but it almost looks like to me, and I don't know anything about this, but it almost looks like to me anything you do to that building, and especially when you start changing parts of it, then you sort of destroy some of what it really was. And it just seems like to me that we could give that spot a lot more notoriety and credit for what it is, with some type of a kiosk with pictures and an explanation of what it is and why it was so special to Kent County, so people can read it and understand. Because you understand what it is when you go up there. I would dare say that there's a lot of people that go up there and look at it just as an old barn, with a big that's in dire need of repair. And I would just like to give some thought to, if we demo that place, what can we do there to highlight what it really was, and that people could go up there and look at something and learn something about the history of Kent County? I don't know.
Well, I mean, this is just one structure of a 140-acre property that you all own. And it's a very unique property. There are not many, this is you essentially own a village, of buildings, in coordination with the state, with Knox Folly. The Eastern Shore Land Conservancy did do a master plan for this property back in 2010, 2011, that I believe that you all had input on. But, this is, there's a lot of history on that property. It did function as a village, more or less, but,
And we don't want to let that history go, obviously. We want to maintain that. But I'm just wondering if it's a better way of doing it than throwing good money into a bad building, into a building that, I read the report, and they verify that it's in rough shape. There's no questions about that. And I don't know. I'm just trying to think outside the box, because it's a very historical building. There's no question about that, but it is sitting in the middle of, I don't want to say it's in the way, but in the condition that it's in the way. And I just wonder if we have some money to spend, we have to spend if we do something with it, that we could put some type of an elaborate, something to memorialize that building and educate the people of what it actually was and why it's important. But that's just me and my thoughts,
the top two grant opportunities, the Maryland Historical Trust and the Maryland Heritage Area, if you have a nonprofit, does not require a one-for-one match. If you want to, and that gives you up to $200,000. You are looking at a stick-built building as opposed, you're not talking about Chestertown Armory, which is millions and millions of dollars worth of renovations. But, I think if, in terms of interpretation of that, it's not just that building. I think the county needs to figure out what it wants to do for the, all those structures on there, because I think that's kind of an open question. The Latham House isn't being used right now, and I don't believe Knox Folly is either, to my knowledge, or at least the brick portion of the house where Wayne Gilchrist used to be.
Yeah, I know I was very aware of the issue with the curator that was at Knox Folly when that issue took place.
I think it's been 15 years now, I think, right? That wasn't a fun one, and I do remember that, and a lot of things in the paper. But
that was if I'm not mistaken, that was the first piece of historical property that created the curatorship program.
I believe that's right.
I think that's the very first one that did that.
This is one of the to my understanding, this is one of the very first properties acquired with program open space funding.
So
one of the very first.
So do you know what's going on with Knox Folly now? It's still with the Historical Society. They're the ones got rid of the curator, but I don't know who.
Well, and I don't know all the legal implications, so you have to talk to your attorney and to Shelley, but I believe that the Department of Natural Resources is responsible for whoever the leasing of the building itself, if I'm correct.
Yeah, we changed that, because there was an agreement with the person that lived there, and
Right.
basically, they were supposed to have it open to the public and do certain things, and they kind of turned it into their private residence and didn't, and then.
Fulfill the
Well, the issue
they
was
would
they
breach-
built that garage and
Yeah.
had an upstairs. Now,
apartment or whatever it is.
Right, and so we had
Remember that.
to end that arrangement, and that took a little longer than what we thought it was gonna take to end that arrangement, but.
the
I
thing
don't
that
think
I
we can have
always
that
thought
again.
was interesting, they let them put a swimming pool there.
And that was the state, and the state holds an easement on that portion of the property.
They let them put a swimming pool there, but they run them away when they made them leave because they put a garage out there. But anyhow, that's.
But he was supposed to have that open so many times during the year.
Half a dozen times, something like that.
And he
yeah.
wasn't doing that.
Yep.
That was, I think, the thing that
The
really
kicker,
got them,
yeah.
because he
Breach
basically
contract.
took advantage of the program to
Yeah.
have his private residence there.
Yeah. So, I mean, off the cuff, I mean, I have no means of saying that, you know, how it can be interpreted or anything of that nature. I mean, in terms of the adaptive reuse, you know, Wayne Gilchrist, when he ran his program through there, and when he started it, I want to say, good heavens, I want to say 2011, 2012, I helped him get started, because my family used to own the property. And, you know, he used the Latham House essentially for just storage of canoes and kayaks and everything like that. And that's what this would be used for. If you were to adaptively reuse it, I mean, the cost of putting a bathroom in here is overly prohibitive. You wouldn't want to do that. Outside of, you know, having electricity to the building for a small office, it would be used for storage. But, you know, we were asked to do something, and we did that for you, and we,
You did a great job, and we certainly appreciate it, so don't.
but, you know, I think it's worth at least trying for the capital funding, you know, if you can, because it doesn't require a match if you get a nonprofit. Now, I did reach out, you know, Rob Etkin, as you may know, is no longer the executive director for Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, but I reached out to Steve Klein, I don't know him well, like I knew Rob, asking whether we could use their umbrella, and he said no. But in years past, when I went through that plan that the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy did, when the county obtained funding back in the late 1970s for this building, and the Ag Museum actually was the nonprofit that they submitted it under. So you know, I think Jen has talked to the Ag Museum, and actually I went over and talked to them one day when they had the cider press out there back in October. You know, they would be willing to, you know, they're a 501c3 nonprofit. If we could use theirs, you know, we have an opportunity to at least potentially not require you to spend any money, depending on what the estimated. I mean, the purpose of having somebody like Barton Ross do the preservation plan is he would give you an actual construction estimate for everything that needs to be done to the building. I mean, what was completed was kind of what in the field of historic preservation is called like a windshield survey. They go out there, they do a very brief inspection, but, you know, it's not going to give you, it's going to cost this amount of money to be able to do this, and this. However, if it's A through Z, everything needs to be done to the building, if that makes sense. But,
And there, excuse me, there are the discussions we've had with the Ag Museum and the gentleman that we spoke with. There are adaptive reuses to use these properties for, to actually use the building for educational purposes, for display purposes, to make it museum-esque in a preservation state, not a restoration state. So we're not looking to make it look like it did when it was built. There are case studies and examples all over this country of those type of projects being done, so there are examples there. To use it for recreational purposes, to use it to make it a heritage economic resource for folks to come down. As 213 becomes a national highway, all of those things can be led down to the Turners Creek area, to use the Latham House, to use the Turners Creek Landing, to use the waterways themselves, which are becoming more and more popular as a heritage tourism site on the actual water. Some of the projects include bringing ships or small boats into the actual area to bring people down there to understand what our tributaries look like. And that would go anywhere from the Bohemia to the Sassafras, down to Turners Creek, to Wharton's Creek, to Green Point. Those kind of projects are the things we're talking about expanding into. So I hear what you say about the building, but part of the commission's task is to know what some of these projects look like. But we have to have the permission to go after the funding. We've already missed at least 2 cycles of this. So what we've said repeatedly is that there are not-for-profits who can apply instead of the county, with the county's permission, apply. And as a not-for-profit, there is no cash dollar-for-dollar match for those because of that circumstance. When we've asked at least twice, we've been expressed no because the county has been asked to be the applicant to allow us to proceed to meet those deadlines. So that seems to be one of the walls that we're hitting, is if we're asking the county, and we understand, we're not going to get permission to apply because it is a cash match required by the county investment. And even if you invest a small amount into this as a not-for-profit applicant, we've expressed that you will not have to do that. The taxpayers will not have to come off the same amount of money for that. The county's burden changes drastically, but we haven't got to the point where we get permission to actually have a not-for-profit apply on the county's behalf.
Is there any liability on the county?
Right now, there is.
No, I'm sorry, Chair, but I mean to allow a nonprofit.
I think we would do some type of.
RFP or
memorandum of
RFQ.
Understanding and have a indemnification clause
Right,
in there.
absolutely.
Where the nonprofit that's in there indemnifies the county, and then the nonprofit would be required to have insurance to cover.
Absolutely.
And
For
those are.
routine maintenance and that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, those are standard. There's examples county, countrywide for those things. And it does assume a responsibility for some maintenance. It does assume responsibility for regular uptake, which would partner with Natural Resources and Parks and Rec on the care of the project, the care of the property.
But, I mean, we met with one nonprofit that, you know, potentially could use not just this building, but, you know, some of the other structures on the property. But, you know, it may be in everyone's best interest or the county's best interest to want to do an RFP or an RFQ in terms of solicit the nonprofits, and, you know, you can vet or have a committee vet what's the best way to use this pretty significant property, not just this building, but property as a whole. You know, I think that, you know, obviously recognizing that the county doesn't have the ability to be able to provide this things that Wayne Gilchrist was doing, you know, have kayak rentals or something like that. I mean, that the county doesn't want to be in that business, or giving out tours and everything, or school groups and things. So, but in terms of the funding, I think, in my view, there's a very good chance that you could get, you know, a very significant or almost most of your capital funding. You know, I don't know if you would have to put out a lot of money for that, if, you know, especially if a match isn't required. But, you know, the preservation plan itself, I mean, I don't see a way for the county not having to put out some funding for that, given that you would need to do a preservation plan, or at least have, you know, close to a final draft before you apply. You know, the deadline for the MHT grant is the end of, or the middle of March. So, you know, Barton could have this done within 1 to 2 month time period, you know, to be able to submit as an addendum to that grant application. If you were to permit either allow us to go out and solicit and get a nonprofit, or you, as the county, do an RFP or an RFQ where you would vet it. That's something that I can't make a decision on, obviously, but,
I think, number one, I too appreciate everything that you all have done to try to help us preserve this site. You know, and yes, you may or may not be successful in actually grabbing some grant dollars to help us in our effort. But the bottom line here is, for me, is that we're still going to have to come up with an extraordinary amount, $200,000 or a little more than that, probably is not going to go very far in this day and time. The building is in such bad shape. I personally like the idea of what Commissioner Fithian suggested, of memorializing this site in some nice fashion. You know, if we were to demo the building, we're on the hook for about 60 grand anyhow, because it's
You have to repay.
project open space money that,
58,000 or whatever
yeah.
it is. Right?
Yeah, so we're on, you know, we're on the hook for like 60,000 there that we're willing to put into memorializing, or at least I think we're willing to.
No question about it.
To memorialize this and to do a really nice job with it. But, you know, we put a fence around this place, and I certainly value the history that it stands for. But I almost feel like spending taxpayer money to offset the cost, even with grant funding, it's just not something that this county is in a financial situation to do right now. I wish we were. If we were, we probably would have fixed it up a long time ago.
I got an $8 million budget deficit for the town of Smyrna, if you want to help me with, too. But
You know, so.
I know the feeling.
Please know that, as far as I'm concerned, that I sincerely appreciate your efforts and your time that you took to try to save this, but I'm to the point where, in the best interest of the county, I think it needs to come down, and we put a nice memorial there, and preserve the history that way. Is it my first choice? No. But I think it's the common sense choice to memorialize it, tear it down, and unfortunately, we have to move on. But, and I know that's probably not what you want to hear.
Well, if
but-
we, because you have to spend 60,000, could we, anytime you tear a building down, this was done, there was a National Register nomination on the property, could we, I think it would probably cost $3,000 to $5,000, is to have a preservation architect go out and document the building. So essentially what that means is taking measured drawings of the building itself, and that could assist you with the interpretation. So essentially that would be elevation drawings and interior floor layout of everything. An architect would do that. So it could be, Center for Historic Architecture and Design at University of Delaware does this. Barton Ross could probably do that for you as well. I don't know what the cheapest price would be.
So Jeremy, educate me here a little bit. What purpose does that serve?
So essentially, if you're going to do interpretation for the well, it does two things.
Okay.
One, it essentially memorializes it for perpetuity. So it goes into the state archives that this building used to be here, and these are the measured drawings and everything of this building. This is what was here, and it goes down to Maryland Historical Trust and the Maryland State Archives. And then secondly, if you were going to do interpretation for this building, you would obviously, you would probably use that, to be able to do some of the signage or something like that. That would give you the basis for doing that. So essentially, under the Historic Preservation Ordinance as it stands right now, we haven't really done this as much since before COVID, but before COVID, we would go, some of the members, I'm trained to know how to do this, and we would do this, like rudimentary, like floor plans or something like that. But in this particular instance, like this is what other jurisdictions do, like Newcastle County, Delaware, when you tear down an historic house or something like that, they typically require the building to be documented by somebody like Center for Historic Architecture and Design or a preservation architect. And essentially that it does the two things that I discussed and may assist you with the interpretation.
We couldn't do that with in-house, by sending,
Well, the commission does it now for all the properties that meet the historic record. We go out and photograph them, document them. In some cases, there's hand drawings finished. There's floor plans that are done that are put on file to help update
Right.
the land records. So the commission actually has that task now in this county. So he's talking about making sure it makes the Maryland Archives
So
space.
this is, in terms of you, this is just having it professionally done as opposed to me going out there on a piece of paper and taking measured drawings.
Well, if we have to spend the money that we receive for it, I don't see why that wouldn't be.
I mean, I can get you a quote for it, but my guess is,
Up to DNR.
That's
for
what I'm saying.
approval.
So can we check on that?
my guess is that would be $3,000 to $5,000, how much that would cost. And then signage, I haven't had to buy signage in a while.
And we're working on a project with Coleman, so we could help with some signage costs. The other thing to add to that is, a young lady that works for Wilmington Washington College is also working on a project with us, and it's possible that they can do a 360 or a 3D version of the building while it still stands, so that there is also the videography taken of the building. So if we ever choose to use it for educational purposes in the future, standing or not, that we actually have the building video, just like you'd see a real estate video of a 360 in a home, that's possible to do that. It may be
We have
possible
to
to do
spend
that.
$58,000, and I think you've heard that the other two commissioners said they're willing to spend, whatever to have something nice here. I'm thinking maybe a little better than a sign, because $58,000 is a lot of money for a sign. So what I'm thinking is that we do maybe some sort of like a television, recording or something like that. And to be totally honest with you, it will probably get used more and be more educational if we could do something nice like that, that it communicates with tourists, and even me as a citizen.
That part I totally agree with, because like I said earlier, if a lot of people go there, they're looking at
Right.
an old barn.
And
They
even
don't
if we
know what
restored
was
it,
even used for.
Even if we restored it, unless there's somebody down there saying, hey, this is what this was, 90% of the people are gonna say, hey, this is an old barn. So personally, I think that there'll be more education, to people if we can do something really nice,
I agree.
you know, that way.
But if you have to spend the $58,000, I think one thing to consider is, again, this is a 140-acre property that, you know, the landing itself is obviously very well used. I mean, probably one of the best used properties up and down the shore. I think everybody can agree on that.
Yeah.
And by the watermen, of course. But is to do some sort of plan to figure out and do an RFP or an RFQ to figure out what's the best way to utilize the rest of the structures there, because I think that's still kind of an open question. You have a lot of historic structures on this property, and, you know, not being, you know, most people don't know what they are, don't know the history behind it. So, again, if you create something, nice video and everything like that, you know, outside of putting it up on the county website or something like that, I don't know. There might be a way for you to integrate something if you were to again, do an RFQ or an RFP to figure out, is there a nonprofit that can help you do the, you know, to be able to better utilize the property, and so that people understand what it is. And similar to what Wayne did, I think he did an outstanding job talking about the history, the environment, you know, that he did for school kids. And I think everybody could agree about that. And it's a shame that it's not being done now. So, but rather than trying to do that here, trying to come up with an actual plan to be able to, what's the best way to use all of these structures, I think is something worth, if you have to spend this money anyway, you know, see about having a plan. And, you know, we could be a part of that, you know, we'd be glad to help you about it. And again, you'd probably be able to get grant funding to help, that you can match that $58,000 you have to spend. You know, we can help you get grant funding, because they have non-capital grant funding that you can apply for to help you do interpretation of properties or help you do preservation plans for properties.
I personally like your idea, myself. And I would suggest maybe that we let Jeremy and this young lady here, you know, maybe form a committee to provide us with some information, what it would look like, and also research the fact that maybe there might be some, with us contributing our $60,000, if that meets the requirement, because we have to, that maybe there's other buildings on the property that could use some attention too.
Yeah, I just wouldn't, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it unless it's something that's sanctioned by you, in terms of, you know, you say that, you know, give us a budget to work with to be able to have a consultant, because it's not something, I'm a planner, I'm a certified planner. I have a full-time job. I do answer Albert's calls when he has, but, you know, we can do an
Well, the
RFP.
reason why I say that, you know, it's great that, you know, you're trying to do what you're trying to do here, but you also have a lot of personal knowledge.
Right, I guess
Yeah.
we're just wanting
Yeah.
to keep you guys
So, you know,
involved with it as much,
we
as
wanna
you- I guess as much as you
utilize
want to be.
that.
I mean,
So I mean, if you give us, you know, and again, DNR has to sign off on it, because I know that those payback requirements, I don't know if you're required to go out to bid and all those sort of things. I don't know what those requirements are for, or what they're gonna require. But, you know, my recommendation would be, let's get the measured drawings done, or some form of that, and then if we can get the okay from you to use that 58,000 and change, whatever that number is, to at least use a portion of that to do an RFP or an RFQ to have a consultant, and then a potential another RFP, RFQ to be able to can we find a nonprofit that helps you better utilize the property?
I would recommend that an informal committee be, right,
Which is
formed.
kind of what I was,
Right,
Yeah.
which would include Jill Coleman from Parks and Recreation,
Right.
probably Dan from Public Works, all the players within the county that would be involved.
Maybe
and-
somebody from the tourism office here.
Yeah, absolutely, and then a plan be forward,
Yeah,
basically.
I certainly don't want to propose anything that the county staff are not going to be in favor of. I don't want to create additional work for them.
You've got an idea about the amount of money that's around, that we're talking about. We've spoken about it numerous times. The only thing I would like to do, and I'd like to put some kind of timeline on this thing, whether it's 30 days or to come back, because there, every reason for talking about it is because the building's not in good shape, and I don't want somebody to get hurt and a wind, with the wind. If you think this committee could come back with a recommendation in 30 days,
Commissioner Fithian, what if we break this into pieces? Because I think the first question is whether or not the 5 to 8K could be pulled from the 58K that we have to put back into the project. If we can move that piece or figure out a function of that, how do we deal with that? And then the committee coming forward with the next step after that could be the Part B. So first we deal with, what did you call it?
The Heritage Review.
The documentation, so I,
Heritage documentation?
right, I can give you two, Center for Historic Architecture Design and Barton Ross that could give you quotes in terms of what that would cost.
I think
To
that's
do
a
that.
good idea, because we need to start there, see if DNR will give us some money for that. We do that, and then the
That
demolition.
And then we
That
can move
document,
forward with the
Correct. And then the
demo
demolition can occur, Ronnie.
while the plan is being
Right.
developed.
Right.
So,
But there are steps that have to be taken before the demo happens, that we have to make sure if the documentation's done or the
yeah, so the-
360's
the
done,
docu-
so all of that has to be.
I think you could sign, unless DNR requires you to go out to bid for this, hopefully they wouldn't require you to go out to bid for,
There would be procurement involved, not a full sealed bid. for
okay,
everything.
but,
Here's another question that I've had throughout this process that we haven't answered. So when residents have a demolition request of a property in the county that meets the heritage requirements over 75 years, they have to apply for the demo permit, which goes through the HPC. Does the county have that same requirement as a property owner?
Bill, do you want to weigh in?
In other words, would we issue ourselves a demo permit? We certainly could.
Does the HPC as an organization need to go through the process just like we would for a resident? In other words, we haven't filed for a demo permit. A demo permit has not been filed yet for the building,
So the
so.
process, I mean, is we would ask you to go out and take photographs, that's our current process, correct?
Yes, and the reason I'm asking is because we just spent months going through this process as HPC not having a demo permit. And now that the demo permit's applied, the entire HPC commission will now sit down with the same information, and we'll have to have a conversation because they'll have the same questions as a formal commission. This hasn't been before the actual commission as a demo permit, so.
but in terms of your timeline, I mean,
Demo
I-
permit hasn't been formed yet.
Correct.
Yeah.
so, I can get you two entities to call, and I can get you quotes for what that would cost, and then get the requirements from DNR. And then, if you want me to put together a proposal, I can ask what the cost of doing likely cost of doing a plan for the property, like in terms of what's the best way to interpret it, including with the signage for this.
Well, I think that we need our committee to kind of get together and be a part of that conversation. I mean, honestly,
Yeah. The only thing that I, like, in terms of, you can have the property documented and you can move forward with the demolition, okay? But in terms of finding out a means in which to do the plan for interpretation, that's gonna take longer.
the only
Yeah.
That's
thing,
why I'm saying.
and I
Yeah.
don't care about
Separate.
that.
Yeah.
You could we can take as much time to make sure we
I just
get
wanna
it
make sure
right.
they're clear on the expectations that I can't get that done in 30 days.
No,
Right.
but we want it
right,
done.
that's what we're saying,
Yeah.
phase.
We want it done right. My only concern is I don't want to be here 6 months from now still talking about that building
The
sitting up
demolition.
there. I'd like to see the documentation take place and the demo, and then
then develop.
I'd like to
the
see
plan.
that done within 30 days if we could, and then you can take we can take as long as we want.
Yeah, and you can
Doing
sanction
the-
a committee and create a committee that, you know,
Yeah.
I think, you can think about
And
that in terms
Bill
of who you
can,
want.
if we can get with Bill and maybe do a demo permit, so they have that on record, we can, that seems reasonable to me. It solves their problem of thinking that the building's in real bad shape, somebody could get hurt and to clean it up around there, and then it gives them plenty of time to do a good job and.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess that process would probably take 6 months.
But I really
Having
would-
gone through those processes.
But I
And I'm
really
okay
would
with
like
that.
to see, you know, I mean, part of this money to go into, like Ronnie said earlier, I mean, I think that, you know, having that kiosk or whatever we're gonna call it down there would be
Yep.
super important for
No,
this piece
absolutely.
of property.
And-
Whether, you know, whether what we're planning in the future has no bearing on what this kiosk is gonna.
If we can get the demo, get the measurements and stuff and the demo done in the next month, I don't care how long it takes to get the rest of the project done.
And DNR has already told us that we can proceed with the demolition prior to coming up with the plan for how to spend the money. They understand the concern with time sensitivity.
Good.
Yeah, just-
liability.
Yeah, just need to get clarification from them that, in terms of the documentation, that's an eligible expense. I'm sure it would be, but.
Yeah, and with regard to people's time, we're right in the middle of the holiday season, so if the 30 days starts today, we're going to have 2 weeks. Well, that's not sufficient to ask for agencies to get involved and schedule appointments. We don't even know how far out we have to schedule with the organizations we're talking about.
So the first step is finding out if DNR will approve that this heritage documentation could be paid for with that 58K. If the answer is no, that changes the conversation. If the answer is yes, then we've got to get some quotes and figure out a plan forward.
And get it done, and then,
Right.
Yeah, I
I
mean, in
really
terms
would
of,
be hard pressed to believe that they wouldn't allow that, though, the money to be used to
yeah, that-
talk about what it was all about, just that specific building. You would almost think that's,
yeah, I mean, I don't think you're gonna have an issue with that. I think the bigger question from them is whether or not how they require the procurement of the vendor to do that.
so asking for this architect to come in and actually measure everything, to document, is that something that we would ask Dan's folks to kind of oversee, or is that something that we would?
I would.
The county would have to sign as a signatory
For
vendor.
county facilities.
Probably supervise it, but
The way I'm
you
kind
have
of
to get
looking
an
at this,
architect in there to actually do it.
if,
Somebody
Right.
outside of the
Correct.
county.
if what Jeremy's saying is correct, it's only $3,000 or $5,000. I almost think that we should just, instead of spending time going to DNR and waiting for right here at Christmas, waiting for 2 weeks turnaround on that we maybe think that we will just cover the cost for that documentation to kind of stay within our 30-day window here of moving things forward. Because we're gonna put that money back into the property anyhow,
And we
one way
are,
or the other.
right, and
so what you're
We
saying,
are
we
still
could
dealing
foot
with
the
the
bill ahead of
holidays.
time and in hopes that we're gonna be able to get it back.
Right. Or we gotta spend the money anyhow.
Yeah, spend it anyhow.
As long as it doesn't exceed $5,000.
Yeah.
And then we would need to find out exactly when we can schedule that thing to happen. So if it's on the 6th week of the
Right,
30-day
I think
window,
what
we
they're
can
saying, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, I don't know how far these guys are out, but
Listen, I said.
just wanna be
I
reasonable about the
threw
30-day
30
window we
days
keep
out
setting.
there,
Yeah,
just-
okay.
to
I
show
can-
that we'd like to get that thing taken care of.
I can call Barton and Kate Morrissey at the University of Delaware tonight and just see what their timeline is, because I don't know, they obviously have projects as well. They might not be able to go out next week, something like that, to be able to do that, but, I can call and get you an answer and get back to Shelley.
Okay.
well, I think,
That
yeah,
works.
that's how we'll proceed, is with that then, and then we'll start with the permit process.
And I don't know, and Dan, I'm not sure if you know, if the quote is still valid for the demolition. I know we're outside the window, but I don't know if they would honor their quote.
We have requested an updated quote.
Okay.
So you want a motion on the money?
No, we have some more
architect.
research to make before.
Okay.
Well, we really appreciate what you've done, and we hope that we'll work together
Yep, we'll get
in highlighting what this granary used to look. Look, it's not a good day for anybody when you have
Yep.
to take down a structure like that.
Yep.
But that's why it's the only one left on the bay, is because the rest of them got old, I guess, and, but we're gonna make the best of a bad situation by trying to do something very educational and memorialize that building, and we wanna do that. So you have our word that that's
Okay,
what,
so I'll make phone calls and I'll get in touch with Shelley and see if we, and you can be put on the next, I guess you guys won't meet till January, right?
Correct.
Yep, so, or first Wednesday, or Tuesday in January. First Tuesday in January.
January
thank you both very much. Appreciate it.
January 9th.
January 9th.
January 9th.
Okay.
Thank you, and have a nice
Absolutely.
Christmas.
Happy holidays. Dan Mattson, our Deputy Director of Public Works. Judge Murphy, would you like to come up forward? I think we're going to be talking about you.
If you would like me to, I'd be happy.
Well, I'd like for you to be able to hear real good, and I want to see your facial expressions, and we
I get criticized all the time and told how I should check my facial expressions, and never been very good at it.
go ahead, Dan.
Sure. So this item is an update on the current status of the courthouse lobby expansion project. A brief history, there is funds budgeted for renovations to the courthouse lobby, I'm sorry. Those funds are $25,000 for design and just over $36,000 for construction. We've met with an architect to review the scope of the project and what code implications may be triggered by altering specific rooms. And ultimately, we've landed on two potential designs for the lobby. There's some pros and cons to each design, but ultimately, the hard cost of the less expensive design falls between $74,000 and $106,000, which is well beyond our current budget for the project. The architect themselves have produced a proposal for design efforts associated with the project. That's $16,000. And if we were to move forward with that, we would present both designs to you for consideration. The $16,000 for architecture design is under the $25,000 budgeted, but the total project cost is substantially higher than what was budgeted in total. We're talking all-in price of $90,000 to $123,000 for the total project, with $61,000 and
Well,
change budgeted.
Let me ask the first question here. The project that you're giving those estimates to, is that putting a kiosk,
Vestibule.
vestibule out front of the? or is-
No.
What, I think,
Yeah.
I know John and I both visited the courthouse and we talked to the judge about it, and what I think, and Judge, you correct me if I'm wrong, but what they would really like to see is just that wall gone, opening up that office space, giving more room. Is that for the price that you're talking about?
Yes,
Is that the project you're talking about?
Yes, the architect prepared an estimate for the,
That's not putting them,
this is
Can I ask a
not to put the
question?
vestibule, yes.
You're saying it's gonna cost $100,000 to remove one wall?
No, I'm saying, the architect is saying that $74,000, between $74,000 and $107,000 would be to demolish the wall, complete the rewiring of all the electronics in the wall, to expand the existing flooring, wall molding, ceiling tiles, painting, exit signs, lighting, mechanical systems, fire alarm systems, and plumbing systems associated with the overall expansion project. There's much more to it than simply tearing down the wall.
Now, that's an estimate, and I guess,
Yes.
and we've got that from one person, is that,
Yes,
so we would obviously, if we decide to move forward with this, we'll put it out to bid, and it could come higher or lower,
absolutely.
right?
Probably a conflict of interest for me to bid on that.
Not really.
Depends on whether you're higher or lower.
You just don't vote on it.
Consult with your attorney.
Well,
I would
I'm gonna
recommend,
consult
there
with my
could be an
judge.
appearance
'cause
there, I would recommend not bidding on it.
I'm gonna consult with my
After-
judge.
after visiting the courthouse and being very familiar with the courthouse and very familiar with the security needs there, and I know Commissioner Fithian was there as well, and Albert, you're probably somewhat familiar with it. What the judge is recommending, taking the one wall out, is, in my mind, the best way to use that space.
Sure.
If you do the other thing with putting that glass barrier there, as folks come in, yeah, it might create a little more security, but it's also gonna take up the space that you're trying to gain. So, I wanna support what Judge Murphy is wanting, because I believe it's in the best interest of security and the courthouse as a whole. So, I would like to make a motion that we move with, getting bids to take that wall out and bring them before us, and we will approve it and pay for it out of ARPA money.
Okay.
Got a motion, is that a motion?
It is a
Formal
motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed, the ayes have it. Dan, thanks a lot, and we'll wait to hear back from you with, you're
But
gonna,
this will be an open bid. I mean, we've agreed to get the design.
Yes, I have a proposal right now from the architect who prepared the initial estimate, and has scoped out the project with us in the field a couple times.
And then it'll be an open bid.
Correct.
The actual construction, absolutely, yes, yes.
The bids will be sealed, but
Right.
there'll be an RFP. and-
Right.
and
Yeah.
Any
qual-
open as in anybody can
Correct.
Anybody can
submit.
apply.
Absolutely, yes, but we will.
Except for me.
We'll proceed in authorizing the architect to begin their work under the proposal that was included in this item, prepare the bid packages, and get that out to bid, certainly.
very good.
Thank you.
Anything else, Judge?
He's got something else on his mind.
Well, I would just
read.
like to, I sent a letter in, I don't know whether you all seen it. This project was initially approved, presented to you and approved in June of 2022. And at that point in time, it was the commissioner's hope that the whole project would be finished within that fiscal year. Well, we never got anywhere. And I don't know what this $100,000 is that Dan's referring to, but the original quote that I provided to the county was from KRM, and that was not only to remove this one section of the wall into the office, it was to go into the existing restroom. So that quote was for about $30,000 for the construction, and it was a much more extensive
Well, you know what, Judge?
project. Everything's going up, no, I understand that.
No, well, obviously, things have gone up since '22. We're a year, almost two, past that, but KRM will have an opportunity to bid again.
Well, and so I
And
want
it
to
may
thank
come
you all
in,
for.
it may come in much less than what Dan was referring
I
to.
guess we'll find out.
We sure will.
Your Honor, if I could please the court. Albert
Very
and I,
unlikely.
Albert and I were not here in 2022, as commissioners. Just for the record, Your Honor.
I understand, that's why I said the commissioner's that.
And I was sort of the odd man out, but I was here, but I was sort of the odd man out too.
All right, thank you all.
Anyhow, no,
If there's anything else you all need from me, I'll be happy
nothing
to provide.
pleases us more than to see a happy judge go out the door.
Go out the door.
The second part of that probably pleases you the most.
Hey, Derek, you a mess. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, now departmental appointments. We have Ms. Jamie Williams, Director of Economic Tourism Development, and she's going to give us an update on short-term rental.
So, good evening.
Steve?
Enjoying the Christmas ties and the Christmas colors, so thank you. Just real quick update on short-term rentals, because you guys asked us to keep you apprised on the progress. We had discussed the local legislation, and Pat had forwarded that final draft to Tom, and I know there were some emails back and forth today making some final revisions. So my guess is that now goes to the county commissioner's office for scheduling in the process. So
I think we're
working on
looking
that.
at legislative day in January
Okay.
for that.
And
That's to talk about the
At the end of it, we're amending our code with respect to the tax to add some things to make it more consistent with the state code and to try to update it and modernize it a little bit to get some procedures in there. So
Okay.
that's all in motion. So I think we're on track to get that before you for introduction in January.
Okay.
And then we've also finalized the draft MOUs with the towns, and Rose updated them to make them unique to each municipality. And by unique, I just mean signatures and stuff. The content is the same, so that all towns will be treated exactly the same. We'll have to work out a timeline, because obviously we will want the legislation to be done first, then work on the MOUs. So we'll work out the timeline internally. We did work on the final draft of the statement of work and the scoring matrix, and that was distributed to the group for review. So we're waiting on feedback from that for the procurement process. And once that's done, we are going to ask the two vendors to provide updated proposals based on that statement of work, just to make sure that it's up to date, because it's been a while now, and that it meets the requirements of the state of work.
You're talking
And
about the software now.
for the software, yes.
And request multi-year pricing. So we're not gonna request, for a 12-month period, but
Correct.
some vendors have made some verbal, they've implied verbally that they'll do this or that, or honor this or that, or only go up by this percent or that percent. So we're gonna get it in writing.
And I'm assuming that these vendors that we're considering are going to have annual or quarterly software updates that are going to be included?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that is something we can make sure is in, and I don't know that it is, but that might be a good thing to put in the statement of work before we finalize it. But we had talked about it, and like Shelley said, verbally, it was included, but we can certainly have that written into it as well. And then the next steps would be to choose the vendor, and I feel like we all feel the same. We've got two great vendors to choose from, and it's just which one's going to score the highest once we get the two final requests. And then rough timeline, and like I said, we'll work this out to make sure that everything's falling in place. But mid-January to choose the vendor, and then start the implementation of the software. The online tax collection would not actually take place until July 1st of 2024, which is the new fiscal year. Because you don't currently we're collecting quarterly, we're changing to monthly. It's a whole new process for the county staff as well as for the renters, the operators. So you want to have a clean cutoff. But in the meantime, we can be identifying, making sure our reports are running properly, making sure our letters are saying what we want them to say when they go out to the operators. So a lot of work can be done on the back end during that time.
The registration screen will require of the property owners, et cetera.
Yep. So that's it
All
on
right.
that part. So,
Good.
yeah,
Thank you very
that's
much.
the update. And then next,
Now we have
Jamie Williams.
Jamie Williams to give 2023 seasonal shuttle update.
So I did ask Rick to come in after the seasonal shuttle ended in October.
Yes.
He took some vacation and took some time off, but I asked him when he got back if he would please come present to the commissioners to let you guys know how it went, and then talk about possible ways to move forward in the next tourism season, and just to throw some ideas out there. But Rick's got lots of good information he's going to share with you.
Good evening, happy holidays, everybody. Good to be here. Quick background, Commissioners Price and Nickerson, since we're around when we started this. I run Delmarva Craft. We do a variety of tourism things and projects throughout the Upper Eastern Shore, a lot of stuff in Kent County. We work with Jamie's people a lot. This whole project got started in 2021 because I had 2 buses that were unused during the pandemic, and the town of Rock Hall and some local businesses said, will you please help us here during the pandemic, move some tourists around? We said, sure. 2022, we were approached by other representatives of the county and said, can you expand this service out to some other areas? And we entered into an agreement with the county to do so, and part of that agreement is this report. And part of what we do is we don't just take people and drive them around. We track who we pick up, where we take them, what types of places they're being picked up from, where we're taking them to, et cetera, et cetera. So to run through this relatively quickly, in 2022, we picked up over 2,500 people and gave them over 5,300 rides between Memorial Day weekend and basically Fall Fest in October in Rock Hall. This year, the total number of riders has dropped by 10% to 2,374, down from 2,500, and the number of trips dropped 15% down to 4,559. So the first questions you have is why do we think this happened? Number one, anecdotally, I think I've talked to every marina owner in Rock Hall, and transient slip rentals were down this year. And one key thing to know is the primary users of this service are transient boaters and people who are involved in group activities such as weddings, festivals, things like that. 95% of the people that ride these shuttles are not Rock Hall or Kent County residents. They're people who are here on holiday. What we also noticed this year, and maybe Commissioner Fithian noticed it too in Rock Hall, is there are a lot more people riding electric scooters, driving around in golf carts, riding bicycles, and walking. To me is all good. Which is good. Nothing wrong with that. Another big trend we noticed was the number of people just calling up and saying, hey, can you pick us up in half an hour at Marina X and take us to Restaurant Y? Those numbers are down. The number of people calling way ahead of time to pre-book groups of people almost doubled. As in, we have people calling saying, we're bringing 30 people over from a marina in Middle River to Haven Harbor North. We want them to take us to Chestertown to dinner. Yeah, a lot more of that. A lot more people being picked up in Rock Hall and brought over here to dinner locations. And
Probably a lot of that has got to do with the fact that they've discovered that you
Yes.
do this. When
Yes.
I tell you, when I was
Yep.
down for the town as town manager,
Yep.
I got just what you said. I got number of calls from
Yep.
boating groups from Middle River and all them places, and they would call and simply say, "Are the trial," at that time, there was a couple
still
trial-
call
"Are
it
the
the trial."
trolleys running this weekend?" And I'd say, "Yes," and I'd say, "Why, yes?" And they said, "Well, if they're not, we're not coming because we don't have any way to get around."
Exactly.
So I bet you a lot of that now that they've heard of your, are be coming back.
We picked up boater groups all over the place. I mean, float in at Gray's Inn Creek, floating in, dinghies out at Broadneck Landing and stuff, all over the place. Tons of that this year, way up. The other thing that increased significantly was use of the shuttle in Chestertown. In 2022, we only picked up 78 people in Chestertown. This year is 339. So that level of activity has picked up. So that's the raw numbers. Overall, we started the year very excited because the first 4 weeks were over double. Like from Memorial Day weekend through the third weekend of June, it was extremely busy. And then it just seemed like end of June through July and the beginning of August, it just fell off the map. And then obviously around Pirates and Winches, the middle of August, way back up, and then sagged. And then in the fall, September and October had some really good weeks. And that's largely driven by tons of people being in town for weddings and Fall Fest and things like that. and that drives the ridership. I'm remiss, I should step back for a second and first of all say thanks to the commissioners and Upper Shore Regional Council and the town of Rock Hall and town of Chestertown for investing in this and supporting it. As I said a minute ago, 95% of the people that use this don't live here. I guess the question, and I'm sure we're all aware of the economic issues facing us and budgetary issues, is how you want to invest money in a service like this for people who obviously have the means to travel here and get here. I guess it's a decision for you guys to make. I get a lot of requests from local people. We're not requesting much as comments about, well, what if there were a regular shuttle that went 5 days, 7 days a week and had a regular schedule and all that kind of stuff? And we're just not in a position to deliver that. And honestly, it's kind of a struggle to keep up with just doing every weekend all summer long. And I guess one of the reasons I was asked to do this is there's anecdotal conversations that have been going on forever. We need this, we need that, we need the other thing. Local demand for using these vehicles is extremely light. It is almost exclusively tourism. Small handful of people that we picked up on a regular basis to take them to work on a weekend job and bring them back home, but almost all tourism. That said, that, as you said, Commissioner Fithian, people know it's there now. They're calling. I see there will be a steady growth in group people wanting to use this. Absolutely true that there are people who say, oh, well, if there's no trolley there, we're not coming to Rock Hall, we're going to go somewhere else. It's something to keep in mind. But as far as being a vehicle for use by Kent County residents, virtually non-existent.
How about that? Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions first?
No, thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
service.
Our pleasure.
Absolutely.
A couple of things that Rick mentioned that I want to make sure that we mention here. You know, Rick's not sure that he wants to do this, you know, for going forward. So that's something that, you know, for us to think about. I know there's some transportation grants out there that I'll be looking into. And, you know, just trying to think about what we do. I think, Rick, you said you had 2 vehicles and one he's having some issues with right now. So does he replace it? Does he not replace it? Does he continue to do, you know, and obviously we would work with him. But, you know, we just got to think outside of the box and what are the other opportunities?
Well, you look through the financial numbers, it's not a lucrative business to be in.
Right.
And absent, you know, the county's subsidies,
Right.
it's a complete loser. But on the other side of things, again, as Commissioner Fithian said, when you've got people calling up every week going, okay, there's a shuttle, then we're coming. But over the course of the year, and as you see the group numbers growing, what's the economic
And
negativity if we're not doing this at all? How many people does Rock Hall lose? How many people does Chestertown lose? What's the overall economic impact? I know you guys are going to talk about that in a minute. Just how important is this to the county for tourism? But by the same token, I'm sitting here listening to talk about the granary and the tough decisions you got to make. Do you really want to be subsidizing the bus that hauls the person from their yacht to their dinner, you know? Again, that's not my decision to make, but these are questions that weigh on my mind.
Yeah, I got you. Thank you for your honesty.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All
I'm a
right.
taxpayer here too, man. I'm rooting for you guys.
thank you very much.
My pleasure, guys.
All right, have a good one.
You too.
Shailen Bolden, Tourism Manager, Economic and Tourism Development, here to 2022 Economic Impact of Tourism in Maryland.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I am here tonight to present, you just said it, the economic impact of tourism in Kent County for calendar year 2022. Each year, as part of the Maryland Office of Tourism Development Destination Marketing Organization grant that was approved by the County Commissioners on October 31st, Exhibit A DMO grant guidelines states that each DMO shall participate in the Tourism Impact Report for the state of Maryland and Maryland's DMOs. The annual cost for participation is eligible for reimbursement through the grant. Tourism crosses many NACE codes: lodging, food and beverage, recreation, retail, transportation, etc., therefore not easily measured through traditional data sources. Tourism is always economic development. It brings new dollars into our economy, which has more weight than recirculating dollars. Studies have shown that these dollars will then get spent again at least 3 to 7 times more by those living within the local community. A visitor, in the state report terms, is defined as someone who stays overnight and has traveled more than 50 miles to visit the destination, which in this case is Kent County. So local tourism dollars spent here are not included in this report. They are in addition to the numbers that we are about to discuss. In 2022, the visitor volume for Kent County was 328.1 thousand. So that's how many visitors came to see us in 2022. That is up from a 2018 count of 291,000.
Now, you track that because of stays in motels, and that's how you track that?
Yes. It's a lot, I mean, like I said, it's a lot of data sources that they pull to get all these numbers from. The Kent County visitor spending in 2022 was $72 million, which is up from a 2018 number of $63.2 million. So overall, we've done pretty well. And then another part of the economic impact report is visitor-supported jobs. So Kent County in 2022 has 640 visitor-supported jobs here in the county.
What do you mean?
Jobs related to tourism.
What is it?
Jobs that are related to tourism or visitors.
Okay,
So retail, lodging,
People that work in
restaurants,
marinas.
marinas.
Yeah.
very good.
And even though the numbers of the direct employment don't seem to be rising as high, the revenue is still rising as well as the number of visitors. So, but you do see, and that could just be a different classification of how businesses are classifying themselves. So, you know, with, Shalyn and I had a discussion about the NACE codes earlier. You really have to know your community because NACE codes are self-reported when people file their taxes. So somebody could be, you know, they could consider themselves a retail business when really they're wholesale or really they're agriculture. So, you know, sometimes it's human error and sometimes, you know, for manufacturing, I mean, just as an example, there are certain grants out there, if you don't file under that NACE code, you can't apply for that grant. So there are some people that will classify their business as that because they know they can get manufacturing tax credits or winery credits. And I'm just making something up, but so the NACE, so it's really important that you just really know your community and you know like where everything's falling. And I would say the thing that we have to be proudest of here in Kent County is we have a very diverse economy. It's not all one or two things. It's a handful. And that's great because when one suffers, then the other's there to pick it up. And the community doesn't have as much of an impact.
Very good.
Any questions?
No? I don't think.
Good job.
Thank you.
Chair? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and happy holidays. I don't see you guys.
Same to you. Same to you. Jim? Jim Miller, Director of Human Resources, for a modification to Department of Planning, Housing, and Zoning staff duties.
Yeah, two items for you this evening. Bill's here as the resident expert on what we're talking about. What this is, and there's a memo that you have in the record to describe this. Bill has a vacancy, and long story short, he has a vacancy for a position, a grade 4 position. It's come to his attention that a former employee, more experienced, significantly more experienced person might be interested in returning to Kent County from another county. It would be in the best interest of the department to staff up to that skill level. So basically what we're asking for is permission, and he has a vacant position at the grade 7 level, but it wasn't funded for FY24, but it is in place. Basically all we're asking for, and HR's supportive of the recommendation, is to allow him to fill the vacancy instead of a grade 4 position with a grade 7 position. He'll redistribute the workload across the staff that he has, but it skills up the staff that he has within the department, and will pay better dividends in the long run.
And you think so, you have someone maybe interested at a grade 7 level?
We would open the
We would open up the
advertising
recruiting, but
and,
But
A
at least
former-
he's got an idea that he knows someone
a
might
former
be
employee of
interested.
his, one of his former staff who left for a career opportunity, has continued to skill up, but is interested in returning here and working for Bill again. There is a cost implication to it, it's 3 grades higher. We estimated that it might be $10,000 to $14,000 annualized to bring in a higher skill set person, but we think that's well worth it in the long run.
So obviously, this is to fill a vacancy at the grade 4 level.
Well, we would bring in somebody at a grade,
Vacancy was a
Well-
4 level.
Yeah, but I mean, the vacancy was at grade 4, so you've been saving some compensation.
couple of months' worth, yes.
Any idea how much that,
I think we estimated about $6,000 in what we haven't spent in salary since the vacancy, I believe, a number
so
like
do
that.
you need the
I think that's
the,
about the number.
number I have here in front of me?
It's about
where you-
14.
Where you could knock 6,000 off of this?
Yeah, because it's hard to judge when you have the vacancy, how pure that number is. But we know we haven't spent, Bill hasn't spent about $6,000 in his salary budget. We took a look at, he has one other incumbent at a grade 7. We compared that person to the candidate, at least the potential candidate, and with looking at internal equity, I had an estimate of what the salary would be, and that's where the $14,000 figure came from that you have in front of you. But if we have truly saved about $6,000 in unused salary dollars for the last couple of months, it could be a net effect of about $8,000 or $9,000 to do this.
So the grade 7, we took off the table last budget season.
You allowed the position to stay on the org chart, but it wasn't funded,
So it was
as I
taken-
understand.
So it was taken off the table.
Yeah, we weren't allowed to fill it this year. You have an interesting way of doing that with leaving it on the org chart but not funding it. That's kind of different than
But we
where I've
probably
been
tried,
before.
we probably tried to take it off and it probably got left on there because we've tried to do that before.
Oh,
And-
okay.
And we tried to remove 2 positions, well, I'm not going there.
Yeah, well, which,
Nevertheless.
if it's unfunded,
Yeah,
it's
that's a different
effectively
discussion.
non-existent.
But what we did do is save 6 months' salary.
Correct. And my point is that, so obviously we won't be adding an additional grade 7 this year, and we'll be minusing a grade 4.
Correct, the net effect
That's
really
what-
is
right.
that you're
Yeah.
reclassifying.
I just want to make sure that we're all
Well,
clear.
You're going
Correct.
from.
That's
I
the
want to make
puts-
sure, I want to make
that's
sure,
the
I want
puts
to
and
make,
takes.
I want to make
Seven.
sure that we're all clear.
Yeah.
And that we're not coming back with another position
No.
come funding time. That's all I want to do. That's it.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Good question.
Well, I think a lot of it's going to depend on the applicants that you end up interviewing and the one that you choose. If they have those same qualifications that you expect one of them might have now, I personally don't have a problem with it. And because you've already been saving probably $6,000, we've estimated, then, whatever you're going to need from the fund balance,
But that will be reoccurring.
that will be reoccurring.
Right, because you're setting it
It
from
will.
a 4 to a 7, so you're going to have that expense next year and ongoing.
The difference between 4 and 7 will be reoccurring.
Yes,
Right.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
But you're not going to
You're
hire.
already in a budget for a 4.
But it seems
You're
to
not, you're
me,
still going to keep, that 7 that was on the shelf is now going to be a 4 on the shelf. Correct.
Yeah,
Which you're not.
I think that's the way that
Yeah.
would play out, yeah.
You're basically swapping them. You're going to fund the 7 rather than the 4. You had a 7 and a 4, and you were going to fund the 4 but not the 7. Now you're going to fund the 7 but not the 4.
We hope.
Whatever.
Yeah, that's how I kind of
Okay.
see it.
But I, in your defense, I do think the traffic in your office has gotten heavier, and you've certainly been saddled with some I'm just glad we don't do those comprehensive rezonings every 2 years instead of every 10 or 20. That's been
same.
for a bunch of different reasons, but that's took much longer than any of us anticipated, I think.
That's exactly the same comment I was gonna make because of the increased work level. And with this potential applicant or future applicants that might have the same ability, it's gotta help you, I mean, within the office, I would think. So I would like to make a motion that the vacated grade 4 planning specialist be reclassified to a grade 7 associate planner to be funded from the fund balance in the amount necessary to make
Fill
that
the
happen.
vacancy, yeah.
I got a motion.
Which I'm hoping is $9,000.
I got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, the ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Bill.
Keep up the good work, Bill.
Yep.
And I mean that. I mean,
So
you're
we'll
doing a
have that-
phenomenal job.
We'll have that rezoning comprehensive
I agree.
plan next week now.
Wait for January.
30 days, 30 days.
You're saying that we're gonna be seeing that plan in January?
30
That's
days.
the goal, sir, yes.
I bet you'll be glad to get rid of it, won't you?
It really just starts another round.
Good. Well, thank you.
Thank you
And,
very much.
I agree with what Sheriff said. You do a great job for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim.
Mr. Miller, your teleworking policy.
Yeah, this is a kind of a revisit from last meeting. During the conversation at last meeting, there was a couple of things that you all wanted us to revisit. We've done that. There was two items in particular. One, we increased the allowable teleworking amount from 10% to 20%. That's in the document that you have. And we removed reference to human resources being a reference or an advisor for the departments as they were looking at teleworking possibilities for their staff. Both of those things have been done, so the document that you have in front of you is clean from those two items. And as I understood it, those were the only two hang-ups at the last meeting.
So one, at least the department heads will be in charge of how much of that they allow with oversight from they'll have to answer the county administrator if they are out of line or they got a problem, they'll
Yes.
have to deal with her.
Yep, exactly.
Very good.
Well, there's some language that probably needs to be cleared up, but, and I think we can still go ahead and move this forward, but with an amendment under, in my opinion anyhow, under the informal teleworking request, it says that, well, I basically agree that the county administrator should be involved in the approval along with the department director, not necessarily a designee of the county administrator. I truly believe that the department director who's running that department and the county administrator, without involving someone else from any other, whoever the designee might end up being, has the ability to decide whether it's appropriate or not. So I would ask that that be amended.
Generally, the only reason that, in policies that I've written elsewhere, the only reason we've made an allowance for a designee is for the absence of the leadership position, the county administrator. If Shelley goes on a month's vacation to Maui, we'd like to have somebody, we wouldn't want to hold up the teleworking
We're
for a
not gonna let her
month
go. We're not gonna
until
let her
that
go.
happens.
Vacation.
That's all.
Yeah, I was going to comment, that's a fairly standard provision in policies to say
Yes.
somebody or their designee to take care of things if they're not available for it.
Yeah,
It
that's all it
doesn't
is.
mean that you're expecting her to delegate it all the time,
Nope.
but if Shelley or the person in her position is unable to do it or is unavailable or tied up on something else, she can delegate it to the extent that that's necessary.
Right, that way business can continue
Yeah,
without
it gives you
gaps in time.
flexibility, so
That's
you
all
don't
that
have to
is.
change the policy in the future.
There was no anticipation, as Shelley and I talked about this particular policy, that she was going to delegate this responsibility on a routine basis. It was simply to allow for contingencies.
And I think you've made your opinions known to her, that you do not expect her to routinely delegate it. She would only delegate it at times when she's on vacation or unavailable or tied up on something else for you. But that would be
Apparently,
more
a
the
month
exception.
and now, he was agreeable to my boss, one of my bosses, so, you know. so.
Well, you remember our conversation from last week about this. I still believe that it should be amended to the county administrator overseeing this and the department head, not necessarily a designee who may not know anything at all about what the other department's doing. And I don't want to leave a loophole, and I wasn't going to say this, but maybe I need to. I don't want to leave a loophole where the county administrator is there and her or maybe her designee will be someone from HR who means well and wants to do a good job, but to me, that's a department head role. They know what's best for their department.
And I think this specifically refers to ad hoc requests. I don't
It does.
think,
It
only ad
does.
hoc. But, no, I've explained why I included the language, and Tom's correct, it's pretty common and
I've seen
customary.
it before, but
Yeah, I
we
would
need,
just-
we need to be clear.
I would just say this, that you can direct the county administrator that you feel that absent unforeseen or unusual circumstances, that you expect her not to delegate this. I think that would cover it, or you could add a sentence saying, you know, it's expected that the county administrator will perform this, this task and will only delegate, I don't know, under limited circumstances or something like that. I don't think that's necessary, but you could do that. I think you just making it clear to the county administrator, which you already have, that you expect her to do this and to only delegate in exceptional circumstances. I have no reason to believe she's not going to follow that, so I think you would be good.
I still believe that it's important to have the department head involved in the conversation.
Then make the motion.
Yeah, you want to make a
Right,
motion
so I'll make a
to adopt
motion.
as amended.
I'll make a motion to go ahead and approve the current commuting policy, to be deleted and replaced with a new teleworking policy, and amend the informal, let me get to my notes here. Come on, computer. To amend the informal teleworking request to be approved not only by the county administrator, but the department head, instead of designee.
Well, is that an and or an or? Because if you want it to be approved by the department head, then you would say the county administrator and department head.
Well, then
If
it's
it would be
and.
either one, then it would be or. And that's a pretty important distinction.
Right.
So it's whatever you
And I-
want to do, but we just want to make sure we get it right.
We'll have an and in there then.
And, okay, so it would require both the
That's my
department
motion.
head and the county administrator approving.
That's your motion.
That's my motion.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.
So if somebody wants to telework, they've got to make sure that they make that request when the county administrator and their department head's available to act on it.
For approval.
Or approve it. Because if they make that request and one of those individuals is unavailable, then it's going to be a denial by default.
I couldn't envision a situation where a staff person would skip their boss and go directly to the county administrator.
And that's not the intent
And ask to
either.
telework anyway.
Yeah, that is definitely not the intent.
So, yeah, I don't, that wouldn't have
I
occurred.
mean, I
That
think
wouldn't
the
occur.
easiest procedure would be for the
Or would have
employee to
a
go
voice
to their department head, and then the department head goes to the county
And
administrator.
that's what we had envisioned with this
And
policy.
that's what should happen.
Right, so that just clarifies.
But you do have to get approval from both, so that means if one is unavailable at the time the request is made, it's gonna be a denial.
Right.
Yeah. The only other thing
In
I
most
had.
of those cases, I would think that that would be done ahead of time. I can't see that
Right.
becoming urgent.
Right.
And I happen to be off sick and I'm not there to approve it. I think that you'll know ahead of time, but
Thank you for mentioning that, because I don't want to lose sight of the fact teleworking is not supposed to be in lieu of sick leave, or even in lieu of vacation. If you are sick, take sick leave.
No
We have
question
a
about it.
very generous sick leave
Absolutely.
policy. This really is for the exception to that, not the standard, so.
The only other thing I had this evening, it's not on the agenda, but I was asked, Shelley, Pat, and I were having a conversation about the January salary increases, and I was asked if I could take a minute to raise a question for the group. The commissioners approved a 6% increase for FY '24. It was split into two parts, 4% in July and 2% in January. The question that came up was, and I know this may sound a little out there, but the question came up as to whether or not the 2% in January is supposed to be 2% on the original base prior to July 1, or on the current salary that people were carrying after the 4% increase. Here's the impact. We gave a 4% increase on July 1. We're going to give 2% in January. And you all approved 6%.
Right, on that salary as of July.
Historically,
correct.
that's
Yeah,
what the
and that was the
county
question. And so the impact is simply this. Instead of a flat 6%, it actually nets out to 6.08% by doing the second 2%
That's not our
off the
intent.
current rate.
That's not our intent. Our intent is 4% increase in July,
Right.
that, and then another 2% on the old salary as of July 1st.
Or as of June 30th.
June 30th, right.
Okay.
All right, another 2%, so it's a total of 6%.
That was the question.
And
How
however
are we
that-
doing the math? That was
And
the-
however that comes out, I don't know, but
No, that was the question. How are we doing the math? Are we doing it the one way, and it turns out to be a flat 6%, or the other way, and it turns out to be 6.08%? And when
the
you look
answer is
across
we're gonna do a flat
245
6%.
people, it's an annualized expense of $10,000, or basically $1.60
Fair question.
every 2 weeks
Okay.
for everybody.
Yeah.
So that was the only question.
I'm hearing that we're gonna do the flat 6%.
Clarification. So there's no motion needed because it's already budgeted.
Right.
So it's just a small.
we're just
And I think
clarifying
that's a
our intent.
reasonable interpretation of what was approved
Yeah.
prior.
Okay.
That's how I would default, that's how I would interpret it on a default basis, just as the
Yeah,
commissioner.
and not really remembering the language that was used at the time,
Because it was 6% above what they were getting in
Yeah,
June.
what
not
I think
above what they're
confused it
getting
was
now.
that it was split into two parts, and that was just where the question came up.
Basically, it was deferred, the second 2% was deferred.
Yeah, so it just changes the math a tad, I mean, practically nothing. Okay, thank you, just need to
Thank
get
you.
that clarification.
Let's see if we can get those checks out, please.
Huh?
Let's see if we can get those checks out. I know you had some unforeseen circumstances, but I think it would have really been really appreciated by the folks that were here earlier.
They're gonna be rolled out very, very, very soon. They're not coming back to you or anything. We're not waiting for another meeting. As soon
Good.
as that reconciliation is done and the person confirms it, we cut checks and they're on their way.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay. County Administrator, Shelley.
Okay, thank you. I have two items in front of you. Both deal with filling vacancies on boards. The first is the Kent County Library Board of Trustees. We have one term expire, and so the library board advertised, took applications, interviewed, and there is a recommended candidate in front of you for your consideration.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint the recommended candidate to the Kent County Library Board of Trustees to serve a full 5-year term.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, the ayes have it.
Okay, thank you. Second one is the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. We have 2 student members. Both of their terms are expiring. Both are interested in serving until the end of the school year, if it so pleases you. In addition, there is another position that is currently expiring, and that person is willing to serve another term with your approval.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the reappointment of 2 representatives by granting a 6-month extension and the reappointment of the recommended candidate to an additional 4-year term.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, the ayes have it.
And just one other item for your review, no action necessary, is simply the Form 2 estimated expenditures for police protection grant report is included in your packet.
What is the total that the county gets from the Maryland Police Protection Grant now? I know it's based on.
It's almost the same as what it
Is it?
was.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very similar. I have no further items for you this evening.
All right. Well, John, you have any questions? Because you're the only public left, huh, son?
No questions at all. Comments? Be nice, it's Christmas.
Wait.
All right, I
Wait, there's
have-
another resident in the room. Bill's a resident.
Oh, I know he's a resident, yeah.
He's also an employee, but he's now a resident.
Yeah. Congratulations. Thank you.
I do have a public announcement that I'd like to make.
Oh, help yourself, yeah.
It has been brought to my attention that a public notice appeared in the Tidewater Trader encouraging citizens to visit a prepared website. The notice published pertained to the continued concern shared by many on the blueprint education reform and exactly what the financial impact will be for our county. For the record, yes, this Board of Commissioners has concerns regarding the cost. We also support a quality education for every Kent County student and are committed to fulfilling our obligation. We share a good working relationship with our school board members and leadership of our schools. Your commissioners have taken several steps with our partners in Annapolis and will continue to do so in an effort to secure funding for our county. For some time now, the associated cost for implementing the 5 pillars has been a moving target and still is. Raising property taxes is not an option for us, the 3 commissioners sitting here tonight. And I believe we can all work together in many different ways to accomplish our goals on behalf of our students and citizens. For the record, the commissioners encourage all citizens to become informed and involved. Please know that the commissioners were not involved in the recent publication. And I'd like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Very good.
Good job. Thank you.
Now, need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Got a second?
Second.
Or you want to stay a little
No,
longer?
I'm done.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Do we have to sign this tonight? Do I need to sign this tonight?